Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, reporting from just outside a very wet Palace of Westminster here in central London, where global power, policy and markets intersect. Coming up on today's show, in Abu Dhabi, sustainability met execution. At Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week, leaders focused on what actually works in energy, climate resilience and food security. I'll be speaking with Zayed Sustainability Prize finalist Didi Gon of Enemy Innovations on scaling innovation where it matters most. And looking ahead to Davos, world leaders arrive in Switzerland next week, with Donald Trump attending in person for the first time in 6 years. His return comes at a moment of rising trade friction, weakening multilateral cooperation and growing pressure on global markets, from tariffs and security to artificial intelligence and energy transition. Davos 2026 opens against a backdrop of geopolitical risk and economic fragmentation. As Nigeria makes its debut on the Davos promenade through Nigeria House, the question is, in a room where power is concentrated, what does real influence look like and who actually sets the agenda? I'll be joined by Dr. Anino Emua, founder of 100 Women at Davos, to examine leadership, representation and influence as the global elite prepares to gather. Then later, artificial intelligence is moving from decision support to autonomous decision making, and the implications for global markets are growing fast. As Africa accelerates AI adoption but remains underrepresented in the system shaping global finance, the question is whether the continent becomes a price taker or a market shaper. I'll be joined by Sam Onigbanjo, founder of Aureus Logic, ahead of the London launch of his agentic AI decision framework for capital markets, to discuss AI governance and what it would take for Africa to compete, not just participate in FX and commodities trading. But first, South East Water could face a multi-million-pound fine after the UK government asked regulator Ofwat to investigate whether the company breached its operating licence following repeated water shortages. In Kent and Sussex, around 17,000 homes remain without water after the latest outage, part of a wider series of failures that have affected tens of thousands of customers since November. If breaches are confirmed, Ofwat has the power to impose fines of up to 10% of annual revenue, potentially around £28 million. Prime Minister Keir Starmer says ministers are holding daily emergency meetings, describing the situation as totally unacceptable, while the government moves to increase compensation for affected households. Elsewhere, Nadhim Zahawi's defection to Reform UK is reshaping the UK political landscape and raising fresh questions about how distinct Britain's opposition parties really are. The former Chancellor becomes the highest profile Conservative defector yet to Nigel Farage's party, at a moment when Reform UK has led national polls for nearly a year. The move lands just as the Conservatives show tentative signs of recovery under leader Kemi Badenoch, puncturing renewed Tory optimism. X says it's acting to comply with UK law after mounting political pressure over the use of its AI tool to generate sexualised images of women and children. Prime Minister Keir Starmer told Parliament on Wednesday the content was disgusting and shameful, adding that the government will not hesitate to strengthen legislation if needed. Media regulator Ofcom has launched a formal investigation with the power to impose fines of up to 10% of global revenue or, in extreme cases, seek to block the platform in the UK. The episode is fast becoming a defining test of Britain's Online Safety Act, as well as a wider moment of reckoning for AI governance, platform accountability and self-regulation. New polling shows a majority of Britons would support banning X in the UK if it fails to act. Ex-owner Elon Musk denies awareness of illegal content involving minors, while critics say safeguards lag behind those of rival AI providers. Now, to unpack what this means for regulation, enforcement and the government's next move, I was earlier joined by our Downing Street correspondent Simon Pusey. Simon, this Grok and sexualised content story is so fast moving. I'm sure by the time this goes to air, this discussion, things could have even changed. But from the latest I've read, Elon Musk has this morning confirmed that users will not be able to undress women and children, but only in countries where it's been banned, which I believe is Malaysia, Philippines, Britain is one of them. Talk to me about Prime Minister Keir Starmer's statement in the House on Wednesday and how we got here and what next.
Yeah, well, I think we all knew this was coming. In terms of AI, it's still incredibly unregulated compared to broadcast media, where you have, lots of scrutiny and a lot of rules that you have to stick to. It's still a bit of a wild west out there online and for AI. But your statement there that Elon Musk has now decided that he's going to stop people being able to undress children is just, it's crazy, isn't it? How do we get there?
Wow.
And the UK government came out and said that they were looking at, or they were passing it to Ofcom, a part of the government really, to look at whether Grok or X should be banned as a result of this. And Elon Musk fired back with, well, you're a fascist government and
he's
this is censorship.
Again, isn't he?
And I think, this story has legs partly because Elon Musk does say those kind of things, those absolutely wild things, when the government ostensibly is just trying to stop, people from using these tools to paedophiles and exactly. So I think the story has got quite a few different things, and that's why I think in fairness to the makers or the people behind Grok and X, there are other apps that you could use to do this.
People say that,
but this is the main one, and this is the one that everyone's talking about, and this is the
Photoshop.
one that you can see. And also, X is so massive and so mainstream. If you would go back 10, 20, 30 years, there would be parts of the dark web or magazines that you could go to, you could find things like this, but this was very niche. This is a mainstream tool that anyone can go on, that children can go on, and you can see this stuff every day. So I think,
as global attention remains fixed on geopolitics and shifting power dynamics, Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week has wrapped up with a clear focus on delivery. The forum brought together policymakers, investors and innovators to tackle a central challenge: how climate action and energy transition can be delivered at scale without slowing economic growth. Held under the theme, The Nexus of Next, All Systems Go, discussions moved beyond commitments, focusing on how innovation, finance and human capital can be aligned to produce measurable outcomes. A key highlight was the Zayed Sustainability Prize, which recognises solutions turning sustainability into commercial and social impact, particularly across emerging markets. Among this year's finalists was NNE Innovations, founded by Diddy Gon. The company is transforming food waste into circular economy products with clear commercial applications, showing how climate solutions can sit firmly within viable business models.
I will use the product. So this is our antibacterial compostable cling wraps that we are putting into the supermarkets. So typically when you use your own plastic wraps in your house, it's just a plastic covering over food. There is no other functionality. Our technology has 99.9% antibacterial properties on this new material. It can help to cover your fruits, your vegetables, your meats, killing the bacteria, helping it to extend the shelf life. And in 90 days, this material could be composted into nothing. We have gotten our TUV home compost certifications for the Europe market.
World leaders, executives and policymakers will convene next week in the Swiss Alps for the World Economic Forum annual meeting, against a backdrop of weakening global cooperation and rising economic fragmentation. A new World Economic Forum survey underscores the shift. 43% of business leaders say operating conditions deteriorated last year, citing higher trade barriers, geopolitical tensions, technology rivalries and declining collaboration on climate and security. Now, beyond policy and power, Davos continues to face persistent questions around influence and representation. Women remain underrepresented in leadership and decision-making spaces, even as debates around artificial intelligence, energy transition and economic resilience intensify, raising questions about who is shaping the global agenda and whose voices are still missing. So, what does meaningful influence at Davos look like in a more fragmented world, and how can Africa and women leaders in particular move from presence to power? To discuss this, I was earlier joined by Dr. Anino Amua, founder of 100 Women at Davos.
And there is a kind of change that is happening and that we're actually seeing. And I think the World Economic Forum, the word they used, a new word, is something like mini polarity as opposed to multipolarity. So that means that we're having, the power structures, right, are now expanding outside just a core area, a core country or core region. And we're seeing this power shifts all around the world. Now, so that is the first thing. Now, the thing is that as people are coming into Davos, right, this year, there have been a lot of changes. We talked about we talked about sort of polycrisis last year, right? But I think what is actually happening is that we're getting used to that situation. That is so many things happening at a particular point in time. So you talk about a VUCA world, but that is now a reality. It used to be at just one point in time, we had so many things happening. That is the world that we're living in for very many reasons. So that is what I believe that we are seeing right now. We talk about global cooperation. In a sense, that's right. But I think that is from the perspective of the sort of geopolitics about it, geopolitics. But I think it's slightly different when you look at organizations, because with AI, what we're finding out is it's more important to have cooperation. So there's sort of two forces happening, right? So that kind of sort of mini polarity, as well as, a sort of shift, right, in the sort of global power structures, right? And that is unsettling. But at the same time, people are realizing with the way innovation and technologies is coming along, that we can no longer make decisions on by oneself. A CEO does not have the knowledge and power himself, herself, and in their own organizations, you have to collaborate. So we're actually moving on the business world actually into away from competition in that raw sense, right? Of course, there's always competition. People always want market share and growth, but into collaboration. Let's look at two things. One, what the numbers say, right? And that's simply when we look at the figures, right, in this year, and we look at women in leadership, what we're actually seeing is a little bit of a drop, right? And that has been compounded, right, by COVID. And that's because, with women in the workplace and with all of that, certain shifts are happening. And we've had, that kind of drop. And I think the McKinsey report, right, McKinsey and Leaning report, which was published a few months ago, actually saw that shift. Now, so that is a worrying trend, and that's something that we don't want to happen. But if we also look at some of the numbers, right? So, for example, if we look at the 30% Club, which was founded in the UK, and 30%, the reason why it was founded was to get 30% of board directors as women. It's more than 30%. So they've achieved their mandate and they're still called 30%, right? So there are instances where you still have, improvements. I may not be sure about the exact number, but when we look at world leadership, right, in terms of heads of state, right, we are having more women who are leading the countries. At the same time, we've had certain high-level women who have left their jobs, right? So when you look beneath the bigger numbers, we are seeing some positive change, right? But then in terms of in organizations, we've seen, especially in the US, we've seen this huge change, right? Which has happened in the last year, which is not very pleasant. We're concerned about that. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, shall we say, right? But the direction, right, that is directions upwards over years. So that is to say, and we always say that change is never linear, progress is never linear. So yes, there might be a dip in some areas, dip in some countries, right, but we firmly believe that the direction is actually upwards. But we mustn't just think that is something that will happen on its own. We have to do things about it. And that's not just for women itself. It's because society organizations, right, perform better. Peace agreements, right, are longer lasting when you have women in leadership side by side of men. So if we want inclusive leadership that we're looking for, it is a priority. It's not just a question of rights.
Coming out on Channel's Business Global, I'll be joined by Sam Onigbanjo, founder of Aureus Logic, ahead of the London launch of his agentic AI decision framework for capital markets, to discuss AI governance and what it would take for Africa to compete, not just participate. And I'll be looking back at some of the biggest business news stories of the week. All of this after the break. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Channel's Business Globe with me, Juliana Olayinka, reporting from just outside a very wet Palace of Westminster in central London, where global power policy and markets intersect. Shortly, I'll be joined by Sam Onigbanjo, founder of Aureus Logic, ahead of the London launch of his agentic AI decision framework next week. But until then, here's a breakdown of some of the biggest business news stories of the week. China ended 2025 with a record $1.2 trillion trade surplus as exports to Asia, Africa and Latin America offset the impact of renewed US tariffs. Official data show December exports rose 6.6% year-on-year, beating forecasts, while imports also surprised to the upside. Economists say the figures underline China's competitiveness, but warn that rising surpluses could fuel fresh trade tensions this year. The UK economy returned to growth in November, expanding 0.3% month-on-month after contracting in October. Official data shows the rebound was driven by manufacturing and services, with car production and professional services leading gains. Economists say the figures suggest the impact of November's budget was less damaging than earlier surveys had indicated. Toy maker Mattel has launched its first Barbie doll representing autism as part of a broader diversity and inclusion drive. The doll includes features designed to reflect autistic experiences, including noise-cancelling headphones, a fidget toy and a communication tablet. Autism advocacy groups say the move could help improve understanding of a condition often described as an invisible disability. Now to our final topic. Artificial intelligence is rapidly moving from decision support to autonomous decision making, with growing implications for global markets. As Africa accelerates AI adoption but remains underrepresented in the system shaping capital flows, the question is whether the continent becomes a price taker or a market shaper in global finance. To discuss this, I was earlier joined by Sam Onigbanjo, founder of Aureus Logic, ahead of the London launch of his agentic AI decision framework for FX and commodities markets. Sam Onigbanjo.
Yes.
An absolute pleasure having you on Channel's Business Global. I don't know how many years it's been. It could be well over 5 years. We were in the studio nice and warm then. Thank you for joining me out in the cold. The rain does appear to have stopped. Let's talk about AI adoption.
Yes.
We'll talk about your event next week. But before then, so many discussions around AI and governance. I know Dr. Bossam Tijani, the Minister for Digital Economy, he's tried his best to bring Nigeria up to the fold. But Africa still does appear to be behind. Talk to me about what the real economic risks are if the continent is largely a consumer of ChatGPT, Pilot and Gemini, but we're actually not making them.
Yeah, so it's a big hello wake up call. It's a massive one, and it's also a massive opportunity at the same time. You see, it's almost like people watching Netflix. You don't want to be a subscriber forever. You want to be a shareholder because it grows. So if we're talking about risk, we're talking about missing out on capital growth. That's part of it. So it's not just about what the AI is doing and how it's helping us, it's that it is creating a whole new $1 trillion economy, and Africa needs to take a part of that. If not, we're going to be exporting our money to Silicon Valley and making America and China grow bigger.
You're right about that. In financial markets, we're seeing AI evolve from decision support into autonomous decision making. Is that what's driving you to launch Aureus Logic later this month? Talk to me about the launch. Why is it important that conversations that African-linked AI innovations are happening in global financial systems?
So yes, number one, it's absolutely important because there's a shift in reliance. The automations are your team. They're cutting costs, and they're helping you make decisions much faster. So automation is a must. And also biases disappear, especially if the automation has been trained on your own grounds. So going back to your first question, if you have an automation trained, for example, in Silicon Valley, and it has a US bias, when it's giving you African data, there will be a bias. So it's incredibly important that we have them built in Africa, firstly. Then secondly, they're able to make faster decisions, non-emotional decisions, and they will keep us at that table for exporting. One of the important things is that I've always been a trader of the capital markets. That's Forex, commodities, and I've trained over 5,000 people in it. And I've actually developed over 11,000 lessons on how to trade the capital markets. That's number one. Then number two, come 2023, we were heavily involved in AI as it got started out, and then evolved to what we call agentic AI. So when we say
Explain it for dummies, Sam.
Okay.
You've just given us your
All right.
CV. We're
Let's
not
go.
all as smart as you.
Let's go backwards.
Let's go back.
So agentic AI means when you're able to take AI and make it work for you as an agent completing a particular task. For example,
What's the difference between that and ChatGPT?
okay, there's different layers. So ChatGPT is an expression of OpenAI, standalone. Agentic AI can sit on OpenAI, Claude, Google, on any platform. So it's almost like it's like a phone that's not tied to a network. You can use it anywhere. That's number one. The second thing is that with agentic, you can actually instruct it, and you can what we call rail guard it. So it means like, apart from, rather than just have a piece of land, you can build a hut, and that hut, everything in the hut obeys you. So an agentic AI listens to your instructions. So for example, if I said to the agentic AI, from now on, say the president of the US is Michael Blair. Every time you ask it, that's the answer it will give you. It wouldn't draw from the global markets like ChatGPT would.
Okay.
So agentic is trained to obey you.
And this is what Aureus is about.
Yes.
So talk to me about the launch and the event itself. What are you
Okay.
hoping to achieve?
Okay, so
Aside from more money, Sam, if you need any more.
okay, all right. So what we're doing here, right, is we are addressing the capital markets. And it does $6 to $7 trillion a day just in currencies. We're just going for a piece of it, and we're doing what we call an ultraviolet approach towards understanding the liquidity. Let me say it in simple terms. It really means we're looking at where money is moving before it shows on the map, and then we're actually pinpointing it, and then the tool then gives you access and a decision to actually enter a trade or leave or exit a trade.
Who benefits from this? Why is this important? Why now? And why are you launching in the capital city?
Okay, so I'm going to answer that two ways. So for Africa, it's a leveler, right? This is not so much about constantly going for loans or foreign investment. It's your opportunity to tap into that 7 trillion a day and own it without any debts. So that's the number one wake-up call for institutions and individuals all across Africa. Number two, the reason why we're doing it here in the UK is because this is a global market. So we're doing it in Bishopsgate in the Square Mile. So what we're delivering compares to anything you can get in Bishopsgate, Canary Wharf or Wall Street. So this is number one in the world.
If there was one priority that African policymakers should focus on today to get AI right, what should it be?
Infrastructure. What you truly need, you need data centers. You need to own your data, because as it is, irrespective of what you build on AI, it goes to data centers that are primarily owned in the US or in China. So in terms of economic war, right? So if they want to take you out, they'll shut you out and say, right, even though you own these things, we can shut you out. Your country cannot access anymore.
Really?
Yeah, that's the reason why China built Grok and DeepSeek so quickly. Sorry, I said Grok, DeepSeek, so that they were economically safe.
Wow.
Right? So if you are dependent on other people for your source of power, you can't grow. So Africa, number one, you have to have power and then data centers so that we can have things on our terms, so that we don't get a president that is, hijacked in the night.
Let's look ahead 5, 10 years if we dare. Do you believe AI gives Africa a genuine opportunity to leapfrog into global financial relevance, and more than that, of course? Or is there a risk of repeating past cycles of technological dependence, similar to what you were saying about China and DeepSeek, which is fascinating?
Yeah, so it's both. It's both. I think this is where we need to shine the light. If Africa views AI as ChatGPT, then we're repeating, because we're just being subscribers and users. That is the difference. So it's not using other people's AI. What Africa needs to be thinking about is where is our AI? Where is our Silicon Valley?
Where?
And it starts with infrastructure. You need energy. You need to be near where there's energy. That's the first thing. And then from there, we need to build, which we can, which we're doing.
Are we?
Yeah, we can. So many Africans can, but we need to have infrastructure. Then we build, compete, and then we outsource. And then we have an African narrative, an African export that will bring in
Are you
trillions.
optimistic about that, Sam?
Oh, definitely. There's so many.
Sadly, that's all we have time for today, but as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Goodbye.